Amy was a first grade teacher, and she was getting ready to teach her new students their math class. She had a number of refugee children who had moved in to their new homes in Toronto, so she thought she'd better use some practical imagery to help the children understand the math, and she was actually going to teach them fractions. So she wanted to teach them fourths, halves, and of course, their relationship to the whole. So she brought a chocolate bar, and she took the chocolate bar as a demonstration for the children. She said, now I'm going to show you halves, and split it in two. And she said, now I'm going to show you quarters. And she split the two halves into two. And then she said, now how many of you children would want to have half of the chocolate bar? And a few of the children raised their hands. And she was a little puzzled. She says, well, how many of you would like to have a quarter of the chocolate bar? And a lot more of them raised their hands. And she thought, oh, I didn't teach them well, did I? They didn't get it. So she asked one of the little girls, one of the refugee children, why would you want only a quarter of the chocolate bar? And the little girl said, because then more children could have a piece. She understood sharing. Did the apostles? Now, let's be honest. If you and I were facing a crowd of many thousands, and we were told we had to feed them, and we had 5 loaves and 2 fish, we might be afraid a riot would break out. And certainly we know today a riot would break out in our culture. Well, what does Jesus say? Bring it to me. Bring what you have to me. And though it was a small gift of the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, Jesus used the Eucharistic formula with which he would later on work the great miracle of the Eucharist, the miracle which you and I will experience in a matter of minutes. He took it, he gave thanks for it, he blessed it. And then he sends his apostles to break it, to share it with the people. And as you and I know, everyone had to their satisfaction what they wanted or what they needed, and there was even leftovers. Wouldn't Mama be pleased? There are leftovers in the basket to be put aside. But the apostles at first were not ready. No, send them to town, they can go. In fact, they didn't have caterers in those days, okay? There was no delivery service, right? Send them to town. They'll have to go to the store. No. Jesus is not only concerned for their spiritual needs as he is for ours, but even their physical needs. Jesus was going to give them what they needed when they needed it, because he had great compassion for the crowd. Do you realize that Jesus had just found out that his cousin and prophet, John the Baptist, had been beheaded? Jesus was leaving to go and take a little time to grieve the loss of St. John. But the crowds followed him. And the scriptures tell us he had great compassion for them. So he did not abandon the people's needs. And the question we might want to ask ourselves now is the enthusiasm with which that crowd followed him after that multiplication of the loaves was such that he went into hiding again. And St. John's Gospel gives us the clue as to why that was the case. They wanted to make him king. They didn't get it. They didn't understand Jesus was trying to lead them to a spiritual reality, which was going to be the Eucharist, right? Well, even the apostles didn't get it quite yet either, so you can't blame them. But they thought, wow, this guy can work miracles. Let's make him king. No, Jesus did not want that earthly political realm, because he had a much more important, a much deeper, and a much higher realm with which to touch our souls. So the question I ask you is, God has blessed you and me with many gifts, what are we doing with the multiple gifts God has given us for the good of others? There's a little saying, an old saying, what you are is God's gift to you. What you do with yourself is your gift to God.